Part 4. If the mission was delayed because of such a trivial matter and the target escaped from the city, they might not even know how they died. However, before the car could start again, the two of them were stunned. Their brains seemed to have stopped working, and they were motionless. Their eyes were filled with disbelief and deep fear. The young man standing in front of the car was still smiling. He merely stretched out a hand and waved it at the car. The two of them watched as the things on the ground became smaller and smaller. Then, the car flew hundreds of meters into the sky, accompanied by two miserable screams. At that moment, the two of them finally reacted. They looked at the ground that was getting further and further away from them and started struggling in fear. At the next moment, the two of them stopped struggling almost at the same time. Their expressions of fear kept expanding until it covered their entire faces. Their trembling hands and feet seemed to be telling them about their respective masters' fear and panic. Where was this? They were at least 500 meters in the sky. If they were to fall at this moment, even if they were martial artists, they would probably die. Even if they managed to survive, they wouldn't be able to escape the fate of being severely injured and crippled. Moreover, judging from the current momentum, it didn't seem to be weakening at all. They definitely wouldn't be able to stop at 500 meters. The two of them leaned back in their seats and fastened their seatbelts with trembling hands. Then, like frightened birds, they closed their eyes and prayed. Their pitiful looks were a stark contrast to their muscular bodies and rough expressions. 1,000 meters up in the sky, Wang Yi's palm strike seemed to have exhausted all its power. The car stopped in midair for a moment before crashing down towards the ground. The friction between the car and the air created a terrifyingly high temperature that caused the entire car to turn red as if it was about to burn. The sound of whistling could be heard within the car. As the temperature of the car continued to rise, the two of them seemed to be unable to withstand the immense mental pressure. Their eyes rolled back, and they both fainted. Then, the car disintegrated in midair, turning into countless fragments. Meanwhile, a transparent shield suddenly appeared around the two unconscious men, preventing them from turning into dust like the car and surviving. Their bodies were like feathers as they gently landed on the ground without making any sound. Wang Yi pursed his lips as he looked at their wet pants and the frightened expressions on their faces that had yet to disappear. How could he learn to be a bad person when he was like this? If not for the fact that he had infused a surge of true qi into the car when it was in the air to protect the two men at the critical moment, there would probably be two corpses lying on the ground. No, if not for that surge of true qi, their corpses would have been reduced to ashes in midair, just like the car. It wasn't that Wang Yi had suddenly become kind and decided to let them go. Initially, he had wanted to kill these stalkers. How could he change his mind so easily? It was just that now was not the time. He needed them to survive to settle some things. With a casual wave of his hand, the thick wave of true qi transformed into two formless hands that lifted up the two people on the ground. Then, Wang Yi walked into the dojo with his hands behind his back, still smiling. The two of them floated behind him and followed him into the dojo. In the private suite, Fang Ming's had yet to return. Wang Yi was sitting leisurely on the sofa with his legs crossed, humming a tune from his previous life. Meanwhile, the two unconscious people were lying on the broken floor. On the fourth level of the dojo, Fang Ming's had just walked up when he was shocked by the scene before him. The door to the fourth floor was already wide open, and a group of people stood at the door. The one leading them was the owner of the Tuling Dojo, the peak rank 6 martial artist, Zhang Tuling. Behind him was a group of battle warrior rank teachers. They looked as if they were welcoming someone important. However, Fang Ming's did not lose his composure. He quickly stepped forward and cupped his hands. Greetings to owner Zhang and the teachers. Ming's, you're too polite. Since you've already broken through to the battle warrior rank, you and I can address each other as peers. If you don't mind, just call me old brother Zhang. Zhang Tuling said with a smile, without any air of superiority. After saying that, he grabbed Fang Mingzi's arm and walked into the room, appearing especially intimate. Zhang Tuling could not be blamed for being overly enthusiastic. If Fang Ming's was still at the battle soldier rank, even though Zhang Tuling would take care of him on the account that he was the young master of the Guardian's residence, he would not have treated him like this. However, it was different now. Fang Ming's had broken through to rank 4. Although he had just stepped into the battle warrior rank, he was indeed in the same realm as Zhang Tuling. When one considered Fang Mingzi's identity, as well as the fact that Zhang Tuling had a favor to ask of him, it was not unusual for Zhang Tuling to be polite. At the same time, Zhang Tuling wanted to test the waters. The moment he grabbed Fang Mingzi's arm, an almost imperceptible stream of true qi flowed into Fang Mingzi's body. After all, the difference in strength between the two was too great. Fang Mingzi was completely unaware of this. However, this test set off a massive wave in Zhang Tuling's heart. Was his foundation weak? Was his future path cut off? Was his growth rushed? The answer to these questions was none of the above. Although Zhang Tuling had yet to advance to the Grandmaster realm and did not possess spiritual energy, he could sense Fang Mingzi's state through the stream of true qi. The terrifying strength of his body, his incomparably wide meridians, and his thick true qi didn't make him look like he had just broken through. In his current state, he was probably comparable to a martial artist at the middle of rank 4. If the two competed, Fang Mingzi's chances of winning were even greater than him. However, what puzzled Zhang Tuling was that he had never heard of a martial arts treasure that could greatly increase the strength of its user without harming their foundation. The world was huge. Just because he did not know about such a treasure did not mean that it did not exist. Perhaps this was the reason why the Guardian acquired such a precious treasure. Regardless of whether such a treasure existed or not, it was a fact that Fang Mingzi had already advanced. Furthermore, he was very strong. Even the depth of his foundation far exceeded that of ordinary cultivators. With this in mind, Zhang Tuling became more approachable towards Fang Mingzi. Meanwhile, Fang Mingzi was momentarily unable to adapt to this treatment. In truth, he was already at the battle warrior rank and could be considered an expert. After all, he did not expect to have such a great opportunity today. Breaking through had been too easy and too dreamy. Owner Zhang, you can't do that. I am a junior. How dare I call Owner Zhang by such a name? As Fang Mingzi followed Zhang Tuling into the house, he quickly waved his hand in rejection. Meanwhile, Zhang Tuling put on a straight face and pretended to be angry. In the world of martial artists, the accomplished are the masters. Since we are in the same realm, how can there be any juniors? Mingzi, are you looking down on me by saying that? Seeing Zhang Tuling's determination, Fang Mingzi felt helpless. After a moment of silence, he said, "In that case, please don't blame me for being rude." Then, he cupped his hands and smiled. Mingzi greets old brother Zhang. Although he had changed how he addressed Zhang Tuling, his attitude was still very humble. "Haha, good, very good, brother Mingzi, please take a seat." Zhang Tuling smiled again at the change in greeting. Then, everyone took their seats. Fang Mingzi was arranged to sit to the right of the main seat, which showed how much importance Zhang Tuling placed on Fang Mingzi. After sitting down, one of the slightly fatter rank 4 teachers suddenly stood up and smiled at Fang Mingzi. "I wonder if young Master Fang is prepared to participate in the Young Dragon Gathering of the 13 Southwest cities half a year later." Zhang Tuling did not speak, but he pricked up his ears, waiting for Fang Mingzi's reply. He was the one who had asked the chubby instructor to ask this question. This was also why he needed his help. This country was built upon martial arts, and martial arts were flourishing. Thus, martial artists naturally had a superior status. Because of the dangerous environment outside, it could be said that they spared no effort in nurturing martial artists. Many cities used dojos and Taoist temples to nurture a steady stream of martial artists. Furthermore, the road of martial arts was difficult. Not only did it require great talent, but it also required endless resources. However, there were so many martial artists that they were as countless as a school of carp moving down a stream. Thus, resources were limited, and it was impossible to distribute them fairly to everyone. Only the fittest could survive and the strong would have priority over the weak. The more resources were allocated to the stronger experts, the stronger they would become. Only with more and more experts would they be able to obtain more resources. Kang City was only average in the entire Langya County. It could even be said to be the weakest city. After all, as long as one reached the Grandmaster realm, one could assume the role of the guardian of the city. As for the guardian of Kang City, Fang Yuan, he was merely a Grandmaster who was at the peak of rank 7. Meanwhile, some of the extremely powerful city guards even had the strength of a rank 9 Grandmaster. In comparison, Kang City's strength was indeed not that great. Furthermore, there was not much that Kang City could distribute in terms of martial resources relative to other cities. As a result, the Young Dragon meeting was born in accordance with the situation and gave some hope to the giant cities that were ranked towards the bottom. As the name suggested, this was a distinguished meeting of young people. Every dojo, Taoist temple, or person in every giant city could send the members of the young generation to participate in the young dragon meeting. If one could obtain good results in the meeting, not only would they be able to bring more resources to the giant city they were from, but they could also show off in front of others. Perhaps one would catch the eye of a certain expert and be accepted as a disciple. Then, they would truly be lucky. From then on, their future would be smooth sailing. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they would reach the heavens in a single step. Zhang Tuling's idea was simple. He wanted Fang Mings to represent the Tuling Dojo in the Young Dragon meeting. As the absolute overlord of Kang City, it didn't matter whether the Guardian's residents sent people to participate in the meeting or not. However, Fang Mings was also a student of the Tuling Dojo. Thus, there was a high chance that he could represent the Tuling Dojo to participate. The requirement of the Young Dragon meeting was that the participant could not be older than 25 years old. Fang Mings was only 20 years old this year, which was in line with the requirements of the meeting. Although there were some exceptional geniuses in the 13 southwest cities who had stepped into the battle warrior rank before the age of 25, they only formed the minority. The barrier between the battle soldier rank and the battle warrior rank wasn't even enough to be described as a heavenly chasm, and it wasn't so easy to make a breakthrough. Thus, Fang Mings would definitely be the biggest dark horse in the Young Dragon meeting. With his current strength, it would be an overestimation if one said that he would win more championships. However, it would definitely not be a problem for him to increase Kang City's ranking by a few places. If he could squeeze into the top 5, he would definitely obtain some spiritual treasures. If Fang Mings could represent the Tuling Dojo in the meeting and achieve results, the Tuling Dojo would definitely be given more resources as the main force supporting Fang Mings. If these resources could be allocated to Zhang Tuling, perhaps he would have a chance to enter the realm he had always dreamed of and become the only 2 grandmasters in the entire Kang City. In Kang City with a population of tens of millions, he would truly be below only one person and above tens of thousands of people. Even the Guardian Fang Yuan, a peak rank 7 expert, would treat him with great respect. Of course, what he did not know was that Fang Yuan was no longer the strongest person in Kang City. There was an unremarkable young man in Kang City who was the true top expert in this city. His strength was so terrifying that it far surpassed that of a rank 9 grandmaster. He was already at the pinnacle, and his strength was still increasing at a terrifying speed. Furthermore, that young man even had a crippled rank 9 feet cat, that was at the level of a great beastmaster. Just his pet alone could slaughter the entire Kang City in a matter of minutes. However, the thought of becoming a grandmaster excited Zhang Tuling. After all, that was a chance to become a grandmaster. How many people wanted to achieve this goal but could not do it? Now that a chance to do so was placed in front of him, how could he not be excited? When he looked at Fang Mings again, the fervor in his eyes intensified. His breathing had become slightly heavy, and he was almost completely focused on Fang Mings, afraid that Fang Mings would say no. Fang Mings suddenly realized that something was wrong. Although he had already broken through to the battle warrior rank, he was still just at the elementary stages after all. There was still a huge gap between him and Zhang Tuling. Even if Zhang Tuling had a good relationship with his father, there was no need for Zhang Tuling to be so polite. Then, Fang Mings finally understood. It was said that when others were polite to a person, they definitely had a request. Fang Mings silently thought that this saying was indeed true. Then, he thought again. The Young Dragon meeting. Fang Ming's thoughts began to stir as well. Previously, he had been prepared to participate in the Young Dragon meeting. After all, with his strength at rank 3, he wasn't considered weak. However, he hadn't thought about who he should represent. He had unexpectedly broken through to rank 4 and became a battle warrior rank. This gave him even more reason to participate. First, he could make the Guardian's residence known and meet the young experts from various cities. Second, with his current strength, he could also obtain more martial resources for Kang City. As for representing the Tuling Dojo, it was a trivial matter to him. Although Kang City was not very powerful, everyone in the 13 southwest cities knew that he was the son of the Guardian Fang Yuan. Fang Mings looked at Zhang Tuling's nervous and expectant face. Zhang Tuling had completely lost the composure expected of an expert at the peak of the battle warrior rank. As a result, Fang Mings felt like laughing, but he held back. He was well aware of Zhang Tuling's request. To be honest, the fact that he was able to obtain what he had today, a huge opportunity that could allow him to ascend to the heavens in a single leap, had also benefited him greatly. If it weren't for the fact that he was at Zhang Tuling's dojo, he wouldn't have had the chance to meet Wang Yi. If he had not met Wang Yi, would he be able to challenge the Khanate realm? Would it be possible for him to not encounter any bottlenecks before reaching the Khanate realm? Would he have the hope of becoming a Grand Master? All these would have nothing to do with him. Fang Ming's would probably still be wasting away at Rank 3, working hard to become a high-leveled martial artist, let alone achieve the battle warrior rank. Therefore, Fang Ming's didn't mind helping Zhang Tuling. Instructor Pang, I will naturally participate in such a grand event. However, I wonder whether you mind me participating as a student of the Tuling dojo. Fang Ming's first smiled and nodded at the fat instructor. Then, he stood up and asked Zhang Turing, who was sitting at the main seat. The complex expression on Zhang Tuling's face vanished in an instant. It was replaced by a look of infinite ecstasy. He jumped to his feet and arrived in front of Fang Ming's in a few steps. He didn't hide his feelings at all as he laughed out loud. Brother Mings, you must be joking. If you are willing to represent the Tuling dojo to attend the meeting, I can't ask for more. Why would I mind? With that, Zhang Tuling patted Fang Ming's on the shoulder again and said, I will remember Brother Mingzi's good intentions. If you need anything in the future, just let me know. I will do anything for you. Of course, Zhang Tuling was no fool to achieve what he had today. He immediately understood the kindness in Fang Mingzi's words and took advantage of the situation to make a promise. The following conversation could be said to be a joyous one for both parties. Both parties had achieved their goals. As Zhang Tuling had intended, he received Fang Mingzi's promise. Meanwhile, Fang Ming's did Zhang Tuling a favor and successfully formed his own network. When Fang Ming's walked out of the room again, just like before, a group of people stood at the door to send him off. The only difference was that everyone's faces were more or less filled with excitement. The teachers were also aware that if the dojo were to benefit from the resources obtained from the meeting, they would be the biggest beneficiaries apart from the owner Zhang Tuling. Under everyone's enthusiastic escort, Fang Ming's returned to the third floor. The moment he pushed the door open, he was stunned and filled with questions. What exactly happened when he left? Inside the incomparably spacious room, the floor made of green steel stone had already been completely shattered. Meanwhile, the training equipment was scattered all over the floor. Only the sofa that Wang Yi was sitting on was still intact. At that moment, Wang Yi was sitting there leisurely. Meanwhile, there were two strong men in black suits lying by his feet. They must have fainted. They looked rather miserable. Although Fang Ming's did not know what had happened, he still walked up to Wang Yi and asked carefully, Sir, what happened? Wang Yi raised his head and looked at Fang Ming's, who was standing carefully by the side. He reached out his hand and gestured for Fang Ming's to sit down. Then, without hiding anything, he told him what had happened. Fang Ming's was straightforward and did not interpret much of the situation. He stood up, bowed, and cupped his fists. With a solemn expression, he said, I was incompetent. Please punish me severely. However, Wang Yi waved his hand, indicating for Fang Ming's to sit down first and not be nervous. Then, he said, there's no need to be like this. This matter has nothing to do with you. That Zhao Tianlin is simply too arrogant. Fang Ming's let out a long sigh of relief, thinking that it was a fluke. Thankfully, Sir was perceptive and did not reprimand him. Otherwise, it would be a joke if he were to anger Sir after obtaining such a huge opportunity. Looking at the two unconscious men on the ground, a cold glint flashed across Fang Ming's eyes. His expression was cold as he said in a deep voice, Sir, why don't you hand these two people over to me to deal with? I'll absolutely make them regret being born into this world and avoid dirtying your hands. Wang Yi shook his head and said with a smile, there's no hurry. I still have some use for these two, so I'll spare their lives first. But there's really something I need you to do. Yes, sir, Fang Ming's replied. Wang Yi did not hold back with Fang Ming's. He went straight to the point and said, previously, I was a little negligent. Now, the entire Su family has been threatened by Zhao Tianlin, causing them to be on tenterhooks all day long. I need you to go to the Su family and use your father's name to reassure them. When Zhao Tianlin comes, I will settle the rest myself. Fang Ming's wasn't sure why Sir wouldn't reveal his true strength even though he was clearly very powerful. Instead, Sir took a long detour to reassure the Su family. However, Fang Ming still bowed and agreed. Then, with a serious expression, he said, Sir, don't worry. After Zhao Tianlin comes to Kang City, my father will definitely advance and retreat together with you. Wang Yi was very satisfied. He smiled and nodded. Then, he waved his hand and said, "Go ahead. Remember to cultivate diligently, but you must not advance rashly." After Fang Ming's left, the private suite fell silent again. Then, Wang Yi finally stood up and slowly walked in front of the two of them. With a wave of his hand, two streams of true qi appeared out of thin air and shot towards the two of them like arrows. There were two consecutive soft moans. Then, the two of them woke up at the same time. They first looked around in confusion. The moment they saw Wang Yi, both of them looked as though they had seen a ghost. Their faces were filled with fear. After that, they used both their hands and feet and retreated to a corner behind, as if the wall could give them a sense of security. Wang Yi was not in a hurry. He walked slowly towards them. One of them finally couldn't hold it in any longer and shouted, "We're working for the Lord Grandmaster. No matter who you are, you'd better let us go now. Otherwise, the Lord Grandmaster's wrath is not something you can bear." If it weren't for his trembling body, Wang Yi would have thought that he was stubborn. Wang Yi stopped in his tracks, his interest piqued. Looking at the hysterical look on the other party's face, he calmly asked, "What's your name?" When the muscular man saw Wang Yi stop, he thought that Wang Yi was really frightened by his words and was no longer so scared. A smug smile hung on his face, but his tone was incomparably sinister as he said, "Kid, you don't need to care about who I am. It's best if you surrender now and apologize to us brothers. When the Lord Grandmaster arrives, perhaps us brothers can put in a good word for you and spare your life. Otherwise, not only will you die, but your entire family will be ruined because of your ignorance." Wang Yi looked at the other party's performance as if he was looking at an idiot. In the end, he could not help but snort. Too noisy. Then, he sent a palm strike towards his opponent. Bang! A loud sound reverberated through the entire suite, scaring the burly man beside him. Wang Yi's palm landed on the brawny man who was acting arrogantly a moment ago, simply shattering him into pieces. What was even more terrifying was that there was not a single trace of blood left in the suite. It was as if the other party had never existed. He had completely disappeared from this world. The brawny man who was still alive finally couldn't bear the immense mental pressure and knelt before Wang Yi. With his head on the ground, he kowtowed continuously. A thumping sound was constantly produced as his blood dyed the ground red. However, the burly man couldn't care less about the pain. He kept pleading, "Lord, please spare me. Lord, please spare me. I am only following orders. I don't know how I offended you, sir, but please spare my lowly life." Wang Yi was speechless. Who gave him the courage to be a bad person? Was it Liang, Jingru 1? "You can leave now." Wang Yi glanced at the other party before waving his hand, speaking in an uninterested tone. Sir really spared me." The burly man's face was filled with disbelief. How could he let him off so easily? He could not help but stutter. However, Wang Yi was getting impatient. He shouted angrily, "Scram!" Then, he waved his hand and boundless true qi surged out, sending the burly man's sturdy body towards the window. Bang! The burly man's body smashed into the ground, accompanied by the falling glass fragments. However, no one noticed that the moment the burly man was thrown out, a mysterious light flashed and entered his body. The height of the three-story building could be said to be neither high nor low. With the burly man's strength as a rank 1 warrior, he could barely withstand the fall. His clothes were in tatters, and there were countless wounds on his body that had been cut by glass. Blood was dripping non-stop. The burly man couldn't care less about the pain as he limped away. He still could not believe it. It was just a few words of begging. How could the other party let him off so easily? Wouldn't that make his companion's death too unjust? Did his companion die just because he spoke too forcefully? The muscular man fled for several kilometers. He didn't follow me. The burly man turned around and was delighted to find that no one was following him. Gasping for breath, he adjusted his breathing and gradually slowed down. It was only at this moment that the robust man felt constant pain from his body. He couldn't help but grimace in pain. Wang Yi stood by the window and watched as the burly man gradually disappeared from his sight. The corners of his lips curled up as an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. The burly man was really careful. Although he did not discover anyone following him, there was still a difference in strength between the two of them. If Wang Yi were really following him from afar, he would not be able to discover Wang Yi. The burly man did not go back immediately. Instead, he walked around Kang City for about 10 hours. When he realized that no one was following him, only then did he stroll around. Then, He arrived at a hotel. Wang Yi, who was cultivating at that moment, suddenly opened his eyes and exclaimed. Why was this hotel so familiar? He saw the sign at the entrance of the hotel that the burly man entered. It said, Comfortable Guest Hotel. Even though Wang Yi had been in this world for some time, besides cultivating and leaving the city, he had not been to many places. Thus, as long as he found a place familiar, he must have been there before and would not just be a place from the memories of his previous self. So it's here. Wang Yi suddenly slapped his thigh and said, as if he had realized something. It was no wonder this place looked so familiar. He had broken through to the Grandmaster realm here. He still remembered that when he first transmigrated here, he had obtained a blood-stained check for 1 million yuan and met the activation requirements of the system. As he was in a hurry to activate the system, after leaving the hospital, he found a place nearby, which was this hotel, the Comfortable Guest Hotel. Wang Yi couldn't help but shake his head and chuckle. He was quite fated with this place. After entering the hotel, the burly man headed straight to the top floor. On the top floor of the hotel, at the entrance of a luxurious room, there were two people standing with their hands behind their backs and cold weapons at their waists. Both of their auras were extremely thick, and it was obvious that they possessed formidable strengths. There were more than 10 people gathered in the room. All of them had profound auras. It was obvious that they were all people with great achievements in martial arts. The weakest among them had the strength of a peak battle soldier rank martial artist. Most of the people in the room were actually battle warrior rank martial artists who had reached the middle of rank 3. There was even one person who had reached the peak of rank 6. This person was almost as strong as Zhang Tuling, the owner of the Tuling Dojo, as well as the senior teacher from the Taoist temple who had taken Su Xia away. If these people appeared in Kang City together, the world of martial arts would probably be shocked. After all, this lineup was indeed too luxurious. Lord Lu, when will Lord Grandmaster come to Kang City? We have been keeping an eye on the Su family. Isn't it a waste of our talents? In my opinion, we should just kill those people from the Su family and save ourselves the trouble. We still have to keep an eye on them every day. When the time comes, we can return to the county city directly. Perhaps the Lord Grandmaster will reward us for our quick work. It's not appropriate to kill them directly. Perhaps Lord Grandmaster has other plans. It's best to capture all of them and wait for Lord Grandmaster to come and deal with them personally. What do you know? At this time, the only peak rank 6 expert, the old man called Lord Lu, suddenly spoke. It was just that his voice was a little cold, making people feel a chill down their backs. Capture them, that sounds easy. If you want to die, do it yourself. Don't implicate us. The Su family's business is already on the verge of bankruptcy because of us. Why did it suddenly revive? Don't you know that the Guardian's residence is behind this? No one knows the attitude of the Guardian. If we act rashly and offend him, even if we are killed, our deaths will be in vain. The only thing we can do now is to wait for Lord Grandmaster. During this period of time, we just have to keep an eye on the Su family and prevent them from leaving Kang City. Once Lord Grandmaster arrives, it will be a great merit. As for capturing or killing the members of the Su family, don't mention it again. After the old man finished speaking, the rest of the people in the room immediately nodded solemnly. At this moment, bang, as the door was pushed open, a figure in ragged clothes entered. There were countless wounds of various sizes on the figure's body. There were even some glass fragments that were deeply embedded in his muscles. The figure staggered inside the room, but as he continued to advance, blood continued to drip onto the carpet. The figure was the burly man who had been thrown out of the window by Wang Yi. At this moment, the burly man was no longer as energetic as he was when he was monitoring Li Langxin during the day. All that was left was his increasingly pale face due to the excessive blood loss. The rank 6 expert who just spoke recognized the person at a glance. Looking at the miserable state of the other party, his heart could not help but fly into a rage. It was no wonder why the old man was so angry. Although they were powerful people, Kang City was not their home ground. However, no matter what, they were the subordinates of a grandmaster. They were usually the ones bullying others. When had they ever suffered such humiliation? The old man narrowed his eyes. The aura around him surged continuously as if it was about to erupt in the next moment. Looking at the extremely miserable burly man, he could not help but ask in a deep voice, "Didn't I ask you to monitor the Su family? How did you end up in such a state? Why didn't second elder Tian come back with you?" Only then did the burly man, who was covered in injuries, feel a sense of security. He sat on the ground, panting heavily. When the old man saw this, he walked to the side and picked up a bottle of mineral water. He unscrewed the cap and handed it to the burly man sitting on the ground. The burly man took the bottle of water and gulped it down in a few gulps without caring about anything else. After a while, he told the old man everything that had happened. Pa, the old man was also extremely furious. He could no longer suppress his aura. In an instant, he burst out and slammed his palm on the table. The table made of solid wood instantly shattered under his palm. The old man enunciated every word clearly and said through gritted teeth, "Do you know who that person is?" However, the burly man shook his head. He was already lucky to be able to stay alive. How could he care about who the other party was? The old man suppressed his anger and asked again, "Do you still remember what that person looked like?" This time, the burly man nodded. It was impossible for him to forget that person's appearance. After all, that person was too savage. However, the moment he recalled the other party's appearance, the burly man could not help but shiver. Take him down there and get him to draw the man's portrait." The old man turned around and instructed the rank 3 martial artist beside him. Then, the old man clenched his fist and muttered to himself with a ferocious expression, "No matter who you are, since you dare to provoke the Martial Wind Bureau, you should be prepared to die. Not only will you die, but your entire family will also be buried with you for your foolish actions." "Oh, are you looking for me?" Just as the old man was talking to himself, the warrior called Ali prepared to bring the burly man down. A golden light suddenly flashed across the burly man's body. Then, the golden light transformed into a human figure in the sky. When the burly man saw the figure formed by the golden light, he fell to the ground in shock. He shouted hysterically as he pointed at the figure with trembling fingers, "It's him. He's the one who captured us. He killed second brother Tien." The figure formed by the golden light was Wang Yi. The moment he threw the burly man out of the window, Wang Yi attached a wisp of his spiritual power to him. Wang Yi's goal was also very simple. He wanted to directly cut off all of Zhao Tianline's minions in Kang City and force him to come to Kang City earlier than planned. The earlier he beat Zhao Tianline to death, the earlier the problem the Su family faced would be resolved. He would also be able to sign in with peace of mind and continuously increase his strength. When the old man saw the golden light transform into a human figure, his heart skipped a beat. He knew that something bad had happened. He could naturally tell that the golden figure was actually formed from a wave of spiritual energy. As for what spiritual energy represented, it was obvious. It represented a Grand Master. The person in front of him was actually the spiritual energy incarnation of a Grand Master. The old man complained incessantly in his heart. He glared at the burly man on the ground and couldn't help but curse. He merely sent the other party to monitor the Su family. How did he provoke a Grand Master? This was troublesome. Although the old man felt puzzled and worried at this moment, his expression did not change. He bowed slightly and said respectfully, "Greetings, Lord Grand Master. I was too rude just now. It was all a misunderstanding. I don't know how this person provoked you, but if you want to beat him up or punish him, it's up to you." However, Wang Yi merely smiled. When he saw the old man, he asked, "How do you know that the person who provoked me wasn't you?" A layer of cold sweat instantly appeared on the old man's back. He laughed dryly and said, "Senior, you must be joking. I am a subordinate of Grand Master Zhao Tianline from Langya City. However, I just arrived in Kang City a few days ago. After that, I never went out. How could I offend you, senior?" The old man was smart. His words were soft yet firm. He lowered his status and told Wang Yi his identity and background. If the person who came today was an ordinary Grand Master realm expert, perhaps he would really give Zhao Tianline some face and not make things difficult for these people. However, it was a pity that the person who came today was Wang Yi. Furthermore, Wang Yi had specially come for them. "Oh, Grandmaster Zhao Tianline, what a coincidence," Wang Yi said with a smile, and the atmosphere became more relaxed. Upon seeing Wang Yi's reaction, the old man thought that his words were effective and relaxed. He bowed again and asked, "Sir, do you have a long relationship with Grandmaster Zhao?" "That's right, Zhao Tianline and I do have quite a relationship. I came here today to borrow something from everyone." Wang Yi was talking to himself and did not look at the people in the room. His eyes seemed unfocused as he stared straight ahead. As Wang Yi finished his sentence, the old man's face lit up. He did not expect such a huge turn of events. The Lord Grand Master in front of him had an old relationship with his lord. With this, they would be able to negotiate. Furthermore, they wouldn't have to worry about their safety anymore. Upon thinking of this, the old man hurriedly bowed once more and said, "May I know what Lord requires? So long as we have it, we'll surely offer it to the Lord." Everyone present bowed and echoed, "We will definitely offer it to the Lord." The smile on Wang Yi's face became even more playful as he faintly said, "What I want is very simple. You guys definitely have it. I want to borrow your lives. What do you think?" As soon as these words were spoken, the old man felt a wave of fear, as if he was targeted by a vicious prehistoric beast. He couldn't help but shiver as cold sweat drenched his back. "Run!" Almost without hesitation, the old man roared, turned, and fled, dashing like lightning toward the window. The others were also jolted awake, and they instantly scattered like birds and beasts as they fled. Looking at the panicked crowd, Wang Yi could not help but sneer. Run! Could they escape? In an instant, a strong wave of spiritual energy instantly swept across the entire room, with Wang Yi's spiritual energy incarnation as the center. Bang! 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 The sound of heavy objects falling could be heard in the room. The fleeing crowd seemed to have been frozen in place. Then, they fell to the ground one by one without a single trace of life left in them. No one managed to escape from this room, including that peak rank 6 old man. The entire room fell silent. Other than the burly man that Wang Yi had released, everyone else had turned into corpses. Wang Yi shook his head and could not help but chuckle. They wanted to talk. Who were they looking down on? Although it was just a spiritual energy incarnation, it was still the spiritual energy incarnation of a top great grandmaster. Although it was not very strong, it was not a problem for it to kill a rank 7 or rank 8 grandmaster. If they really managed to run away, then Wang Yi should just quit cultivating. There was no point in cultivating martial arts. He might as well go home to wash up and sleep. Meanwhile, the burly man, who was the only one still alive, seemed to have been scared out of his wits. His eyes were lifeless as he collapsed to the ground. He kept muttering, "They're dead, dead, all dead." This was not what Wang Yi wanted. "Wake up!" Although Wang Yi's voice was not loud, it echoed in every corner of the room. When the voice entered the burly man's ears, it was as loud as a bell, shaking his body. The next moment, the burly man's eyes were no longer lifeless as they slowly regained focus. When he saw Wang Yi, who was formed by golden light, he could not help but feel fear again. His body shook violently like a sieve as he pursed his dry lips. After stuttering for a long time, he finally said a complete sentence. "Please, spare me." However, to his surprise, the terrifying figure actually nodded. Wang Yi looked harmless as he grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. "Sure. Help me pass a message. Tell Zhao Tianlin that I'll protect the Su family. If he wants to kill the Su family, let him do it himself. Don't send any more small fries to die. I'll wait for him here." With that said, Wang Yi tapped the burly man's glabella. Before the other party could react, Wang Yi's figure turned into golden light once again and disappeared from the room. If not for the corpses on the ground, it would be as if he had never been there. After a long time, the burly man stood up in disbelief. Had he really left, he did not expect that he would be saved by the god of slaughter himself. The burly man hurriedly rushed out of the door. He wanted to return to Langya County City. This place was far too terrifying. He didn't want to stay here for even a second longer. The golden light flashed across Kang City and instantly crossed an endless distance, disappearing into the Tuling Dojo. Wang Yi waved his hand and the golden light fused into his body. Then, a faint smile appeared on his face. It was all right. All the pawns had been cleared. All he had to do now was wait for Zhao Tianlin to come to Kang City. It would be best if Zhao Tianlin could come earlier and resolve the issue as soon as possible. Wang Yi could then cultivate in peace. He could not help but look forward to it. He did not want a situation where Zhao Tianlin had not arrived, even after Wang Yi had advanced to the Conate realm. However, after thinking about it, the possibility was still very high. Was the Conate realm difficult to achieve? Yes. To others, it was harder than ascending to the heavens. That was a realm that they would never be able to touch in their entire lives. However, to Wang Yi, it was as easy as taking something out of his pocket. Previously, he had the chance to pluck the Conate Phala and step into the Conate realm. It was just that he had voluntarily given it up in pursuit of a stronger Conate Phala. Perhaps it would take a month, 2 months, or maybe even 3 months. What was certain was that it would definitely not take too much time. Then, Wang Yi could pluck the strongest connate Fala in his strongest state and step into the realm that countless people dreamed of. Wang Yi shook his head speechlessly. Who cared? If Zhao Tianlin could come earlier, he would hammer him to death in Kang City. However, if Wang Yi broke through to the connate realm or possessed the battle prowess of a connate realm expert, he would go to Langya County City and beat Zhao Tianlin to death. In any case, he would just beat Zhao Tianlin to death. There was no point in thinking so much. Then, Wang Yi sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to cultivate again. Although he had just made a breakthrough, it seemed that the power left behind by the purple lightning in his body had yet to be exhausted. It was still continuously providing him with energy and strengthening his physical body. At the same time, his strength was rising rapidly. He wanted to see if he could use this opportunity to make another breakthrough in the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique. After Fang Ming's left the dojo, he headed straight for the Su family villa. He was especially concerned about Wang Yi's instructions. However, when he arrived at the Su family villa, he realized that apart from the housekeeper, no one else was at home. Fang Ming's was helpless. He had to convey the message in person. Thus, he could only tell the housekeeper his identity and ask her to call him when the Su family returned. He didn't stay at the Su family villa for long. Fang Ming's first called his father and told him to wait for him at home. Then, he drove straight to the guardian's residence. Fang Yuan, who was still working, was a little stunned when he received the call. He didn't know why his son was so anxious and wanted him to go home. However, the rarely seen seriousness and anxiety in his son's tone made him not bother to investigate further. He put down the work in his hands and rushed to the guardian's residence. When Fang Ming's returned home, he found his father waiting for him in the living room. Ming's, what happened for you to call me back so urgently? Fang Yuan could not help but ask when he saw Fang Ming's enter hurriedly. However, Fang Ming's was very careful. He looked at his father and said with a serious expression, "Father, please check if there's anyone monitoring our family." Fang Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Fang Ming's actions. What was this place? This was the guardian's residence. This was the power center of the entire Kang City. Who wasn't afraid of death and dared to come here to monitor them? However, Fang Yuan still released his spiritual energy and scanned his surroundings. After a while, he retracted his spiritual energy and said with a smile, "All right, no one is watching us. If there's anything you want to say, just say it. You're being so secretive." Fang Ming's also heaved a sigh of relief. Pointing at himself, he said, "Father, look at my current realm." Fang Yuan was indeed a veteran Grandmaster realm expert. He didn't even need to probe and could tell Fang Ming's realm with a glance. Although Fang Ming's had already broken through to the battle warrior rank, Fang Yuan's face didn't have a trace of happiness. Instead, his expression became increasingly gloomy. He was obviously clear about his son's strength. He was just a rank 3 martial artist who had yet to reach the upper levels. There was only one explanation to explain how he had reached rank 4 so quickly. Fang Ming's had consumed a spiritual material treasure that could temporarily increase his strength. Furthermore, treasures of this type all had a common flaw. They would destroy one's foundation. Clearly, Fang Ming's was in this type of situation. Fang Yuan's face was filled with anger. He was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He pointed at Fang Ming's and said resentfully, "Bastard. Ming's, could it be that you don't know the importance of your foundation? How could you destroy your foundation for a moment of strength?" Looking at the furious Fang Yuan, Fang Ming's did not panic. Instead, he continued to smile and said, "Father, please don't be angry. Please examine your son's foundation carefully." Fang Yuan was taken aback as he subconsciously probed his son with his spiritual energy. As time passed, Fang Yuan's expression became more and more interesting. Uncertainty, confusion, surprise, excitement, and ecstasy flashed across his face. Finally, Fang Yuan took a deep breath and looked at Fang Ming's as if he was looking at a monster. Fang Yuan was a grandmaster after all, and his vision was much better than Zhang Tuling's. After probing Fang Ming's with his spiritual power, Fang Yuan discovered that not only was Fang Ming's foundation remained undamaged, but it could even be described as terrifying. He discovered that Fang Ming's body was like glass. There were no flaws or any hidden injuries. How was this possible? Martial artists would more or less have some hidden injuries during their cultivation process. As one's cultivation level increased, the number of hidden injuries would also increase. One's hidden injuries would only disappear when one broke through to the connate realm, changed the essence of their lives, turned their acquired teachings into natural qualities, and became inhuman existences. Fang Ming's wasn't even a Grand Master, so how could he be a connate realm expert? However, if he wasn't at the connate realm, then how did his hidden injuries disappear? Fang Yuan didn't quite understand. But no matter what, Fang Mingzi's physical body was indeed strong enough to support him until he reached the level of a Grand Master. Not only had his physical body become stronger, but his meridians had also become incomparably wide. At the very least, they were several levels wider than martial artists of the same level. Furthermore, the true qi in his meridians was sufficiently condensed. Although the quantity of true qi was not large, it was as if he had gone through 1,000 rounds of tempering. At the very least, it could support and prevent him from being at a disadvantage when fighting against a higher-leveled martial artist. In short, Fang Mingzi's foundation had already been tempered to the point of being incomparably solid. In his current state, as long as he didn't die unexpectedly halfway, he would definitely become a Grand Master in the future. Fang Yuan felt like he was on a roller coaster ride. In just a short while, his mood changed several times. After all, this was too inconceivable. In the end, Fang Yuan calmed himself down and asked uncertainty, "Mings, what exactly is going on?" Fang Mings did not answer immediately but kept him in suspense. "Father, we'll talk about this later. Protect me first and don't let anyone come into contact with this place. Uncle Wu, help me prepare a pen and a piece of paper." Fang Yuan didn't know what Fang Mings was going to do, but with the lesson he had just learned, he didn't say anything this time. Instead, he was fully focused and on guard. After a while, Uncle Wu placed a pen and a piece of paper on the desk. Fang Mings picked up his pen and started writing, ignoring everyone else. However, his expression was extremely focused as he wrote rapidly. His writing was neat and tidy, and every single stroke seemed to be powerful. As time passed, more and more words appeared on the paper. When the last stroke was completed, Fang Mings put away his brush and let out a long sigh. Beads of sweat kept dripping from his forehead. Even though he had only written a few words, it was as if he had gone through a fierce battle. His entire body was aching, and he didn't have the slightest bit of strength left. Fang Mings had not expected that just writing down the cultivation technique would require so much effort. However, he did not dwell on this question for too long. Instead, he handed over the paper with the cultivation technique written on it. Fang Yuan took the paper. He was also curious about what Fang Mings had written and couldn't help but read it carefully. However, as he continued to flip through the pages, his brows would furrow at times and relax at other times. Subconsciously, he would follow the cultivation technique recorded on the paper and cultivate. Boom! Almost instantly, a terrifying vortex of spirit qi formed around Fang Yuan, crazily absorbing the surrounding spirit qi. In the blink of an eye, the vortex had enveloped the entire Guardian's residence and was spreading further and further. Fang Yuan was startled by the sudden array formation and hurriedly stopped his cultivation technique. However, in just a short period of time, the surrounding spirit qi became chaotic. Fang Yuan could clearly feel that his physical body had strengthened a little. Although the enhancement of strength was very low, his strength had indeed been enhanced. This cultivation technique was able to make a Grand Master feel stronger just by cultivating for such a short period of time. This showed how terrifying this technique was. Fang Yuan was truly frightened this time around. With his eye of discernment, he could tell how valuable this cultivation technique was. It was definitely not something that his son could possess. Even he had never seen such a valuable cultivation technique before. This was probably much stronger than the cultivation techniques of the legendary top geniuses in those sects. Fang Yuan was starting to lose his cool. He understood the principle that a man's wealth was his own ruin. This was not something the Fang family could possess, not even if he was a Grand Master. Grand Masters were very powerful and it was not a problem for them to guard a giant city alone. However, such a precious cultivation technique could probably provoke those rank 9 Grand Masters to fight for it. Even those supreme Grand Masters who had a high chance of becoming connate realm experts would put down their identities and personally participate in the fight if they knew the news. At that time, he, a peak rank 7 Grand Master, would not be enough to deal with them. Fang Yuan finally understood why Fang Mings had been so careful. If it had been him, he might have been even more careful than his own son. He used his spiritual energy to scan his surroundings again. After confirming that there was indeed no one around, He asked cautiously, Mings, where did you get this cultivation technique? Upon hearing his father's question, Fang Mings did not hide anything. He told him everything that happened today, including Wang Yi's request for him to visit the Su family. A powerful surge of true qi burst forth from Fang Yuan's hand, shattering the cultivation technique manual into pieces. Then, he looked at Fang Mings and said reproachfully, My son, you're being silly. Since that gentleman is willing to impart such a cultivation technique to you, this is your opportunity to ascend to the heavens. How could you possibly teach such an exceptional cultivation technique to others? Not even your father is capable of doing so. If that gentleman finds out, not only will you have no fate with the opportunity given to you, but you might even lose your life. Seeing his father's anxious expression, Fang Mings hurriedly explained, Father, when Sir taught me the cultivation technique, he once said that there's no need to keep it a secret. He said that I can share it with Father. Fang Yuan didn't really believe him. How could anyone not care about such an extraordinary technique? However, he knew his son's temper very well. He knew that his son would never joke about something so important. He could only sigh. This Sir Wang was really an extraordinary person. However, as a Grandmaster Realm expert, Fang Yuan's spiritual energy was powerful and he had a photographic memory. Although he had destroyed the paper containing the cultivation technique, he had already finished reading it and the information on it had been imprinted in his mind. Thus, Fang Mings didn't need to write it down once again. After pondering for a moment, Fang Yuan could not help but instruct Fang Mings. This cultivation technique is very important. Cultivate it well. Don't pass it on to anyone except me. Fang Mings agreed with his father's words. He kept nodding and said, Don't worry, father. I will definitely work hard on my cultivation. I won't teach this technique to anyone else. Only then did Fang Yuan nod his head in satisfaction and smile again. He was truly happy for his son. This opportunity was simply too great. The Conate realm, that was a realm that many people dreamed of. If he were to cultivate this cultivation technique, he would definitely be able to advance to the Conate realm once he reached level 9 in the cultivation technique. When he reached level 13, he would be comparable to Conate realm lifeforms, even if he had not reached the Conate realm. How terrifying was this? Perhaps it was more appropriate to call such an opportunity a legendary opportunity. After recovering from his shock, Fang Yuan seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked, How did Sir Wang impart this cultivation technique to you? Fang Mings didn't understand why his father would care about this, but he still replied. At that time, Sir Wang tapped the space between my eyebrows and imprinted the cultivation technique in my mind. I can't forget it even if I want to now. Fang Yuan gasped in shock and muttered, As expected, as expected. Fang Mings was weak and had seen and heard very little, so he naturally didn't have any abnormal reaction. However, no matter what, Fang Yuan was a grandmaster. Naturally, he knew more than ordinary people. Wang Yi's method of imparting cultivation techniques had a name: spiritual empowerment. It was to imprint a cultivation technique or a piece of information into the target's mind using their spiritual energy. It sounded simple, but it was extremely difficult in practice. Not only did it require one's spiritual energy to be sufficiently strong, but it also required extremely precise control of one's spiritual energy. Fang Yuan knew very well that he definitely could not do it. It was not that he could not control his spiritual energy. It was just that his spiritual energy was insufficient. If he couldn't even pass the first stage of executing the technique, how could he have the chance to test his control over his spiritual energy? Only rank 9 grandmasters could execute this kind of spiritual empowerment technique. Perhaps there was a very unique rank 8 grandmaster with extremely strong spiritual energy who could do so as well. However, according to Fang Mings, that person had done it very casually. Thus, that person had to be at least a rank 9 grandmaster, or even stronger. At this time, Fang Yuan suddenly felt pity for Zhao Tianlin. He could have provoked anyone, but he actually provoked a family with a grandmaster who was at least at rank 9. Furthermore, Zhao Tianlin wanted to eradicate this family as soon as possible. Given this person's importance to the family, he was afraid that the day Zhao Tianlin came to Kang City would be the day his soul would shatter into pieces in despair. After a while, Fang Yuan sighed and patted Fang Ming's shoulder. Then, he said, Mings, you must not slack off in your cultivation in the future. The Grandmaster realm is your starting point. Don't waste such a huge opportunity. Fang Mings nodded in agreement. He knew this very well. With his aptitude and luck, he might have a chance of reaching the Grandmaster realm. However, that would also be his ceiling. There would definitely be no future beyond that. If he really missed this opportunity, then he would never be able to witness the peak of martial arts again. Seeing Fang Mingzi's serious expression, Fang Yuan nodded in satisfaction and said, "It's not appropriate for you to go to the Su family alone for the matter that Sir Wang instructed. If you do that, that would be disrespectful to Sir. I'll go to the Su family with you later." Fang Mingz was delighted. If his father went with him personally, the effect would be much better than if he went himself. After that, the father and son talked about Wang Yi for a long time. Only when Fang Mingz received a call from the housekeeper of the Su family did the father and son stop their conversation and rush to the Su family villa. To be able to be a housekeeper in a family like the Su family, she must be a quick-witted person. When Fang Mingz revealed his identity, the housekeeper knew that things were not simple. Back then, Fang Mingz had said that there was no need to be anxious. Then, he asked the housekeeper to inform him when the Su family made their return. However, the housekeeper knew the importance of this moment. When Fang Mingz left, she immediately called her master. After receiving the housekeeper's call, the three members of the Su family had put down whatever they were doing and rushed home. In the Su family villa, Su Xia and her parents were sitting on the sofa in the living room with serious expressions on their faces. They didn't know why the young master of the guardian's residence had suddenly come to visit them. No one knew if it was a blessing or a curse. However, the guardian's residence was their only source of support. It was their only hope of survival. No matter why Fang Mingz had come, they had to be prepared and receive him with the highest standards. Dong, dong, dong. As the door was knocked, the three of them stood up instinctively. They looked at each other and knew that Fang Mingz was here. Instead of asking the housekeeper to open the door, the three of them personally went out to welcome him. However, when the door opened, the three of them were stunned. It wasn't that Fang Mingz hadn't come. Not only was he here, but he wasn't alone. At that moment, there were two people standing outside the door. Leading them was a middle-aged man with an extraordinary aura. Meanwhile, Fang Mingz followed behind him. What stunned the three of them was the middle-aged man standing in front. They were all too familiar with this person. Or rather, no one in Kang City was unfamiliar with him. He was the guardian, Fang Yuan. The three people from the Su family never expected this. After all, only the young master of the guardian's residence was supposed to come. How did they manage to get this person involved? The three of them stood there stunned, but Fang Yuan remained conscious of his actions. He took a step forward, cupped his fists, and said with a chuckle, "I came here today without warning. Please forgive me, Brother Su." His tone did not have the bearing of a superior. Instead, it sounded like he was talking to an old friend whom he had not seen for many years. Su Changgelin was caught off guard. The guardian's attitude was too good. It was so good that he found it hard to accept. The Su family was not a wealthy family and had nothing to do with the guardian's residence. Thus, he did not know why the guardian had come personally and was so kind to him. However, the following conversation made the three members of the Su family feel as if they had fallen into a dream. They didn't dare to believe it. After they entered the house, Fang Yuan went straight to the point. "Brother Su, did you offend a Grand Master?" Su Changgelin did not know what the guardian meant, but he still answered honestly. "Lord, you are wise. It was all thanks to Lord's help that the Su family was able to get through the previous difficulties." Fang Yuan waved his hand and said with a smile, "Brother Su is too polite. The Su family is a part of Kang City. As the guardian, I naturally have to ensure your safety. My main purpose for coming here today is to inform Brother Su that the guardian's residence will take up the matters concerning the Su family." In the following conversation, Su Changgelin was somewhat absent-minded. All that was left in his mind were Fang Yuan's words. The guardian's residence would take up the Su family's matters. What did he mean? Didn't that mean that the Su family was safe from now on? However, the Su family was not related to the guardian's residence in any way. Then, why would the guardian's residence fight against a Grand Master for them? Fang Yuan did not stay for long in the Su family villa. He took Fang Mingz away as he was too busy with work. After the two of them left, the three members of the Su family were still in disbelief. Would the problem that had troubled the Su family for so long, this sure-death situation, would be resolved so easily? The three of them fell into a long silence. In the end, Su Xia's mother was the first to react. Li Langxin clapped her hands and attracted Su Changgelin and Su Xia's attention. Then, she said excitedly, "What are you two waiting for? This is great news. I'll make a few of my signature dishes. Let's celebrate later." However, that trembling voice showed that her heart was not that calm. Su Xia's face was also flushed with excitement. She pulled Li Langxin's sleeve and said, "Mom, I'll go too. I'll be your assistant." There were a few plates of exquisite dishes on the table that were steaming hot. The three of them sat around the dining table and the atmosphere became more relaxed. Everyone had a relaxed smile on their faces. Su Changgelin, who usually did not drink much, filled a cup for himself today. After drinking it all in one gulp, he said with a smile, "Haha. The difficulties that the Su family has been facing will all be resolved today." Li Langxin picked up a mouthful of food and placed it in Su Changgelin's bowl. She had a blissful smile on her face and tears were welling up in her eyes. She nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Su Xia put down her chopsticks and said excitedly, "Dad, Mom, since our family's crisis has been resolved, I'll go get Yi now." With that said, she prepared to leave in a hurry. However, Su Changgelin stopped his daughter. "Xia, don't be anxious." Su Xia stopped in her tracks and turned around in confusion. "What is it, father?" Su Changgelin's expression suddenly turned serious. He beckoned Su Xia to sit back down. Then, he tapped his fingers on the table and pondered for a while before saying, "Don't rush to bring Yi back. The money your mother sent him is enough for him to live in another giant city for a while. Although the guardian personally came today and promised to protect the Su family, we have to be careful. If anything happens, Yi can stay in an outside city and his life will be saved. It won't be too late for us to bring Yi back after the Su family passes this hurdle." After saying this, Su Xia could not help but nod. That was really the case. Logically, there shouldn't be any accidents when the guardian personally promised something. However, just as her father had said, what if something happened? Could it be that Yi would have to be buried with the Su family? At the thought of this, Su Xia calmed down and filled the empty cup in front of her father. The family enjoyed the rest of the meal. Li Langxin was happy and drank a cup of wine as well. This was probably the most comfortable meal the three of them had had in recent times. In a private suite at the Tuling dojo. "Sir Wang, you have a call." A fat man with a greasy face was holding a cell phone in both hands. Looking at the nervous Lu Jiong, Wang Yi could not help but feel amused. With his experience and strength, he naturally would not bother with such a minor character. The past was in the past, so he did not take it to heart. "Sir, Mings and my father have already left the Su family villa. The matter you have ordered to execute has been settled." Fang Mingzi's excited voice sounded through the phone. After hanging up, Wang Yi smiled and shook his head, feeling very satisfied. Fang Mings was considerate enough to bring his father along. However, this was good too. The effects would be much better than him going alone. For the next few days, Wang Yi did not let Fang Mings come to the dojo. Instead, he let him stay at home and cultivate. What made Wang Yi pleasantly surprised was that the remaining power of thunder within his body allowed his cultivation level to smoothly break through to level 12. Furthermore, after signing for a few days, he actually obtained 2 more cultivation techniques in succession. He obtained the 9 Suns Divine Art technique and the Little Leaf Flying Dagger technique. However, they were different from their original counterparts in The Legend of the Condor Heroes. Instead, these 2 techniques both had 13 levels each, just like the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique. Moreover, those who cultivated these techniques to level 13 could fight against Conate Realm experts. Wang Yi wasn't sure why the system loved the number 13 so much, but it didn't stop him from cultivating. The 9 Suns Divine Art technique did not surprise him. It was an extremely powerful technique and a supreme yang internal cultivation technique. When the terrifying true chi that he had cultivated using the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique was transformed, it was only equivalent to cultivating level 7 of the 9 Suns Divine Art technique. Furthermore, it did not even reach the peak of level 7. Wang Yi cultivated the new cultivation technique very quickly, probably because Wang Yi was very strong. In just a few days, he had raised the 9 Suns Divine Art to level 10. As the cultivation technique circulated, 9 faintly discernible suns appeared behind him, releasing tens of thousands of multicolored lights. It was impossible to look straight at them. The supreme yang true chi circulated through his meridians. If one were to get close to him, they would feel an incomparable wave of heat and would find it hard to breathe. Wang Yi thought that across the 13 levels of the 9 Suns Divine Art, every time he increased his cultivation level, a sun would appear. This was indeed the case for the first 9 levels. However, when he broke through to the 10th level, he discovered that the 10th sun did not appear. Instead, the color of the previous 9 suns had deepened, and they were no longer as illusory as before. Instead, they felt as if they were about to materialize and manifest into existence. In the case of the 9 suns divine art, it had been modified by the system and was different from the cultivation method in the original novel. However, since it still was an internal cultivation method, Wang Yi could still accept it. However, the little leaf flying dagger technique really gave him a headache. It was a cultivation technique. It was a cultivation technique. Cultivation was cultivation, while techniques were techniques. Cultivation was the foundation of everything. Refining the body, refining one's qi, and refining one's spirit all involved cultivation. Meanwhile, techniques were an extension of cultivation. They involved skills and moves. They could allow one to use their cultivation and unleash a greater power. He had always thought that the little leaf flying dagger technique was a martial arts technique, or perhaps a skill. However, he did not expect that this was also a cultivation technique. Furthermore, it was a rare spiritual cultivation technique. Similar to the 9 suns divine art technique, Wang Yi's powerful spiritual energy was converted to level 7 of the little leaf flying dagger technique. It also did not reach the peak of level 7. In the past few days, he had also cultivated it to level 10. After cultivating the little leaf flying dagger technique, which had been modified by the system, Wang Yi finally understood why it was said that the little leaf flying dagger technique would never miss its target. This technique had a special effect, which was that it could lock onto the opponent using one's spiritual energy. No matter how strong the opponent was, there was no other choice but to take it head-on. Furthermore, this cultivation technique did not use ordinary flying daggers. At this moment, in Wang Yi's spiritual space, the ocean of spiritual energy had disappeared. In its place were 3 flying daggers. They looked like blades that could split the skies open as they stretched across the boundless spiritual space. When he achieved level 10 of the little leaf flying dagger technique, his cultivation foundation transformed into these 3 flying daggers. The 3 flying daggers were in 3 different colors. They were red, purple, and gold respectively. The 3 colors reflected one another within the spiritual space. They added a few colors to the dark spiritual space and they acted like blazing suns. The red flying dagger was the body dagger. It specialized in slashing physical bodies. Meanwhile, the purple flying dagger was the true qi dagger. It specialized in slashing the true qi of others. Lastly, the golden flying dagger was the spirit dagger. It specialized in severing the spirit of others. The little leaf flying dagger technique only cultivated these 3 daggers. The 3 daggers could destroy one's body, sever one's true qi, and destroy one's spirit. These 3 daggers were enough. Wang Yi had now reached level 12 in the Dragon Elephant Wisdom technique, and level 10 in the 9 suns divine art and the little leaf flying dagger technique respectively. Wang Yi wasn't sure exactly how strong he was now. If he were to fight with himself from a few days ago, he would probably be able to suppress himself easily, right? It was just that he didn't have a single cultivation technique on level 13. Thus, he didn't know if he could fight against a Conate realm expert with these 3 cultivation techniques. Of course, Wang Yi wasn't too sure about this either. He would only know after he had done it once. Wang Yi stood up and stopped cultivating. Although his current strength was extremely terrifying, he was still an ordinary person not long ago. Thus, he was not very used to his strength. The strength he had today would easily take months, or even years, in seclusion for someone to cultivate. Moreover, it had not even been a month since he transmigrated to this world. As his body moved, a series of crackling sounds came from his bones, accompanied by waves of dragon roars and elephant howls. Wang Yi could not help but reveal a strange look. What was this? Did those techniques come with sound effects? He was just like Xiao Feng Wan, who brought in his own background music at the start of a fight. Could it be that when he fought with others in the future, background music would also play at the start of the fight? Wang Yi smiled and shook his head. That scene would be interesting. Wang Yi had not eaten anything during the past few days of continuous cultivation. With his strength, it would not be a problem, even if he cultivated for a longer period of time. However, Wang Yi did not think so. Although he was not a standard super foodie, he was still a food lover. The energy contained in the spiritual food was basically useless to Wang Yi. However, After he cooked the spiritual food and turned it into a delicacy, the stimulation on his taste buds and the enjoyment in his mouth were fascinating. Of course, if there was a connate realm spiritual food, it would be a different story. After eating it, his strength would certainly improve. Unfortunately, Wang Yi did not have any. He continued to rummage through the system space. It was different from cooking for Fang Ming's. When he cooked for Fang Ming's, he needed to increase Fang Ming's strength. Thus, he had many requirements regarding which spiritual food and cooking methods to use. However, it was different now. Wang Yi only needed to find something that tasted good and something he liked to eat. Regardless of whether it was a rank 1 or rank 9 spiritual food, they were all about the same to him. Wang Yi was elated. Then, the corpse of a beast suddenly appeared in the room. It was not very big, only about 2 meters tall. It looked like an antelope from his previous life. It was a giant horned antelope. Its evaluation in the spiritual food catalog was very high, although it was not very strong, and it could only reach rank 3 when its growth reached its peak. Its taste was top grade. Furthermore, the one Wang Yi took out was a peak rank 2 giant horned antelope. Actually, this was already very rare. Since this type of beast had tasted really good and did not have that signature earthy taste in ordinary game, it was very difficult for it to grow into an adult. Basically, when it was at rank 1, it would be hunted down by others. Thus, a peak rank 2 giant horned antelope was considered a high-grade product. As for rank 3 giant horned antelopes, they had not appeared in Kang City for many years. His spiritual space shook, and a flash of red light followed. Then, a red flying dagger appeared out of thin air in Wang Yi's hand. At this moment, only the purple flying dagger and the golden flying dagger remained in his spiritual space. They traversed through his spiritual space, leisurely flying about. The red flying dagger, which was originally like a pillar that held up the heavens, was now only the size of a palm after it left the spiritual space and landed in Wang Yi's hand. Although it was much smaller, the power contained within it did not weaken in the slightest. The faint aura exuding from the dagger caused one's back to turn cold. It was as if an ancient ferocious beast was slumbering within, and any casual strike from it could destroy the world. ! Wang Yi held the hilt of the dagger and slashed at the corpse of the giant horned antelope a few times. A complete piece of fur fell off the antelope as if Wang Yi had taken off its clothes. Following that, the flying dagger moved again. After a few consecutive slashes, the internal organs were cleaned up. The processed giant horned antelope was like a work of art. It was placed on the chopping board. Not bad. Wang Yi rubbed his hands and flashed a faint smile. He looked at his masterpiece and nodded in satisfaction. This was because the flying dagger did not have its own thoughts. Otherwise, it would have been the first to kill Wang Yi. Who was Wang Yi looking down on? He was using a divine cultivation technique to process his rations. A peerless flying dagger that could slice through a master's body was used as a kitchen knife. Wang Yi was too much of a bully. Meanwhile, Fang Ming's had prepared a lot of materials. There was oil, salt, chili noodles, cumin powder, honey, and basically everything suitable for barbecue. However, there was no barbecue rack. Of course, this didn't stump Wang Yi. Powerful spiritual energy surged out from his spiritual space and instantly surrounded the giant horned antelope that had been processed and was on the chopping board. Following that, the giant horned antelope seemed to be lifted up by an invisible hand and laid flat in front of Wang Yi. Wang Yi chuckled as a wave of hot 9 suns true chi surged out from his palm and flew towards the giant horned antelope. In an instant, the wave of 9 suns true chi turned into a tiny sun. It rose and fell, acting as a carbon flame for the barbecue. With a thought, the giant horned antelope began to spin on its own. Then, Wang Yi's spiritual energy became a barbecue grill. He used 2 peerless cultivation techniques at the same time just for a barbecue. Wang Yi was the only one known to perform such wasteful behavior. As the giant horned antelope spun, Wang Yi was also extremely busy. He hummed a popular song from his previous life and kept brushing honey, oil, and various seasonings on the antelope. Yes, Wang Yi did not marinate the antelope in advance. As his true chi roasted the meat, the various flavors would slowly fuse into the meat. The effect of this was much better than marinating the meat in advance. Gradually, the fragrance permeated the entire room. Wang Yi sniffed and looked intoxicated. It was fragrant. It was really fragrant. The aroma of burnt meat and various other ingredients was truly alluring. The roasted meat kept making sizzling sounds. Meanwhile, the entire giant horned antelope had turned brown and shiny. Large drops of hot oil kept dripping onto the ground. Wang Yi stared at the roasted antelope meat and could not help but swallow his saliva. Strictly speaking, this was the first time Wang Yi had cooked for himself ever since he had obtained the Lu Maoxing Peak cooking card. Suddenly, the giant horned antelope stopped spinning. Then, the extremely small sun also disappeared. Clearly, the giant horned antelope had been roasted. It had a burnt yellow color and was dotted with red chili powder. When the brownish-green cumin powder was added to the roasted meat, it was very tempting. Wang Yi gently cut the meat with the flying dagger in his hand and sliced off a piece of meat that was still steaming. Wang Yi couldn't wait to put the meat into his mouth. After chewing it carefully, his eyes lit up. Amidst the slight spiciness, there was the fresh and fragrant taste of oil that was not greasy. Meanwhile, the meat was extremely fresh and delicious. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, and the fragrance lingered in his mouth. Then, he took another sip of fruit wine. However, Wang Yi frowned slightly. It was a pity, although this type of fruit wine also tasted very good, it did not match the roasted meat. If barbecue was not paired with beer, it would have no soul. It did not resemble the feeling of eating skewers on the streets in his previous life at all. In his previous life, Wang Yi liked to find a stall by the side of the road with a few friends to eat skewers and drink beer. However, in this world, there was no white wine, let alone beer. Furthermore, he did not know how to brew beer himself. Thus, he probably would not have the chance to drink it again. Of course, this sigh only lasted for an instant before it was dispersed by the temptation of delicacies. Wang Yi almost transformed into a teote. The flying dagger in his hand was dazzling as the meat of the giant horned antelope decreased until it completely disappeared. The rest of the bones were scattered all over the ground. Then, Wang Yi narrowed his eyes in comfort and burped. He patted his slightly swollen stomach with a look of enjoyment. With a wave of his hand, a black leather bag containing 5 million yuan appeared in Wang Yi's hand. Then, he casually threw the black leather bag back into the system space. After cultivating in seclusion for a few days in the dojo, Wang Yi prepared to go out and take a look at the city. Actually, Wang Yi's cultivation was considered to be more similar to the Buddhist style. After obtaining a certain amount of strength, he was unwilling to enter seclusion all day long to increase his strength. He preferred to stay in a giant city and leisurely enjoy life. He also signed in every day to increase his strength. It was good that no one disturbed him. After walking out of the dojo and standing on the street, a ray of sunlight shone through the gaps in the leaves and onto Wang Yi's face. He subconsciously narrowed his eyes and enjoyed the long-awaited sunlight. There was a lot of traffic on the wide road. All kinds of cars were shuttling back and forth. However, he could not recognize many of the cars. A taxi happened to pass by. Wang Yi waved his hand and flagged it down. Then, he sat in the back seat. The driver was an uncle who was about 50 years old. He was not very tall, but his face seemed honest. Seeing Wang Yi get in the car, the driver asked, "Hello, where are you going?" Meanwhile, Wang Yi was stunned by the question. To be honest, he really didn't know where he was going. After all, he had no goal in the first place. Then, he handed a 100 yuan note to the driver. Wang Yi smiled and said, "Sir, please take me around." The driver took the money and smiled brightly. Then, he grinned and said, "All right. Do you have any requirements on where you want to go? I'm not bragging, but I've been driving this taxi for decades. There's no place in Kang City that I don't know." Wang Yi thought for a moment and smiled. "Let's go somewhere more lively." Upon hearing this, the driver stepped on the accelerator. As the taxi drove on the road, Wang Yi looked out of the window. Although the technology in this world was very backward, the construction of cities was not worse than in his previous life. Perhaps it was due to the unique construction materials and the outstanding strength of the individuals in this world. 100-story tall buildings could be found everywhere. The city was like a forest of giant trees. Meanwhile, the driver was a talkative person. As the taxi drove forward, he kept introducing the surrounding area. There are many lively places, but there are only a few famous places in Kang City. For example, there is the snack street. You can find all kinds of famous delicacies in Kang City there. There's also the martial arts street. They sell some martial arts secret manuals, but most of them are fake. Of course, they also sell real ones. I heard that a battle warrior rank expert from another city found a high-grade secret manual and earned millions of yuan from it. However, there are usually more fakes. People usually lose their money, but everything is just for fun. There's also the battle arena. Every day, there will be martial artists fighting there. The audience can place their bets on who the winner and the loser will be. This is a classic method of squandering money. Some people can become rich overnight there and become millionaires. This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. There are also some who lost their entire family fortune there and ended up losing their family. Behind him, Wang Yi could not help but be interested. He chuckled and said, "Then let's go to the battle arena." The driver was an honest person. When he heard this, he turned the car around and advised, "Young man, the waters in the battle arena are very deep. It's fine to play there, but remember not to be engrossed. You must control your greed. Betting in the battle arena is very stimulating, but many people have lost their homes there because they couldn't control their greed. Also, don't cause any trouble. The battle arena has very strong backers. It's the business of the Shu family from South City." Wang Yi nodded in agreement before a cold smile appeared on his face. The Shu family from South City. According to the information that Fang Mings had given him, the Shu family seemed to be the one who suppressed the Su family's business the most. Although Zhao Tianlin was the culprit, a few people were still willing to flatter him. There were a few families in Kang City who were willing to serve as pawns to attack the Su family's business. This was so that they could curry favor with Grandmaster Zhao Tianlin. Among them, the Shu family worked the hardest. "It's not bad to collect some interest first," Wang Yi muttered. Sensing its master's killing intent, the silver-winged cloud leopard suddenly shivered. There was a hint of humanized pity in its beastly eyes. This fierce person had been angry very often recently. The miserable state of those two people who had provoked him previously was still vivid in its mind. However, who was so unlucky to have provoked this great vicious human being again? At the same time, it would be an interesting show to watch. Other people might not know about Wang Yi's cultivation. After all, the silver-winged cloud leopard was the only witness. Wang Yi improved at a terrifying speed and achieved breakthroughs in cultivation as easy as eating and drinking. As a result, the silver-winged cloud leopard couldn't help but doubt its life as a beast. How could this be called cultivation? It did not know exactly how strong Wang Yi was, but it could sense that he was no weaker than the Conate Realm Demon Venerable. This fierce person was still in the 9-rank system. If he broke through to the Conate Realm, how terrifying would his strength be? He would certainly become very terrifying by then. No matter who provoked the great vicious human being this time, they would probably have a difficult time. However, this also caused the silver-winged cloud leopard to not be as resistant as before. Perhaps, it was a good thing to have such a master. The taxi continued to move forward. Thanks to the chatty driver uncle, Wang Yi heard many interesting rumors along the way. For example, he learned that a rich young lady fell for a poor boy and insisted on marrying him. In the end, not long after, that poor boy's limbs were broken and he was thrown to the Chengyang Lake. He also heard that the son of a certain wealthy man once hid his identity and pretended to be poor in order to find his true love. Perhaps it was because the son of that wealthy man had a misunderstanding about poverty. He felt that with a few 100,000 yuan in his savings in a car worth more than 100,000 yuan, he was already considered poor. In the end, the girl he got together with only wanted his money. Meanwhile, Wang Yi listened with interest and found the stories quite interesting. Next, I have an urgent piece of news. I have news that a disciple from the Taoist temple of Tianzuo City has stepped into the peak of the battle warrior rank at the age of 23 years old. The peerless prodigy is called Hua Changyan. She secretly learned techniques from the top secret manual of the Taoist temple and cruelly assassinated her mentor, Grandmaster Hua Shang. After her deeds were exposed, she was injured by the Dean, Zhang Tianlin, with the heaven-imprisoning finger. Only less than 10% of her strength remains. She has already fled from Tianzuo City yesterday. She fled towards the 13 southwest cities of Langya County City. The Taoist Temple of Tianzuo City has issued a reward. Anyone who provides the location of Hua Changyan, and if the authenticity of the information is confirmed, they'll be able to choose a high-grade secret manual from the Taoist Temple. Meanwhile, anyone who can capture Hua Changyan alive and send her to the Taoist Temple in Tianzuo City can choose a top-grade secret manual from the Taoist Temple. The secret manual can only be learned by the person who received the reward. If it's used for other purposes or leaked, the Taoist Temple of Tianzuo City has the right to take it back. Wang Yi sighed slightly and couldn't help but feel a little regretful. This person had reached the peak of the battle warrior rank at the age of 23 years old. He could be considered a genius. Meanwhile, the driver's eyes lit up as he said excitedly, a high-grade secret manual. If I encounter this genius and receive the reward, I'll let my son study it. I'll simply have to enjoy the rest of my life after that. Wang Yi pursed his lips and teased, Uncle, don't waste your breath. It's fortunate that you didn't encounter him. Otherwise, it would be hard to say if you would be able to live the rest of your life, let alone enjoy your life. The driver couldn't help but be taken aback as he felt a chill run down his spine. He scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. Yes, thankfully, I didn't meet him. Then, the driver stepped on the brakes and stopped the car by the side of the road. Wang Yi looked out of the car window and saw a huge building that was not inferior to the tooling dojo. It stood there like a sleeping beast. However, unlike the tooling dojo, there were clearly more people here. The expressions of the pedestrians were either excited, depressed, calm, or expressionless. They were like zombies. They vividly portrayed all the aspects of life. A huge plaque that was completely carved from night flower stone was erected on the top floor of the giant beast-like building. Shu Family Battle Arena. Wang Yi could not help but chuckle. It was as if the Shu family was afraid that others would not know that this business belonged to their family. Wang Yi opened the door and got out of the taxi. Then, he stood by the road and looked at the battle arena. The silver-winged cloud leopard also jumped out of the taxi. It stood up and swayed its small head as it walked behind him. Hello, the total fare is 13 yuan. You just gave me 100 yuan, so I'll return you 87 yuan. The driver said as he counted the change. There's no need for that. Take the change as the fees for listening to your stories. As soon as Wang Yi finished speaking, the man and leopard walked toward the battle arena. The driver could not help but be stunned when he heard this. He looked up again and saw no sign of Wang Yi. He held the change in his hand and was very happy. This was an unexpected fortune. Nowadays, ordinary workers could only earn 1,000 to 2,000 yuan a month. This trip was equivalent to the rest of his daily salary. Meanwhile, Wang Yi did not care about the other party's reaction and followed the crowd to the battle arena. Have you heard? The blood hand butcher Luo Wen has already achieved 10 consecutive victories yesterday. Those who bet on him have made a huge fortune. That's nothing. Yesterday, the sick demon Li Sanpeng went crazy and killed the bone crusher Li Ning, who is ranked 35th. That battle was truly terrifying. Basically, everyone bet that Li Ning would win, but in the end, many people went bankrupt and some even jumped off a building. Wang Yi shook his head as he listened to the conversation between the passers-by. Did they want to win? It was impossible. These gamblers were just like crops that were raised by the Shu family. They might allow these gamblers to win a little. If these gamblers could stop in time, they could make a small profit. However, most people would be caught up in it and be chopped up by the Shu family. For example, the huge commotion that person had mentioned was clearly a trap by the Shu family. They had arranged for two martial artists with very different strengths to fight. The gamblers would naturally bet on the stronger person, even though the odds would be lower. Thus, the banker made use of the gambler's mentality and used the life of a martial arts warrior to ruthlessly cut a bunch of chives. Of course, if too many people bet that the weaker warrior would win, the winner would be the stronger warrior. As the saying went, 9 out of 10 gambles were lies. Only the Shu family was the eternal winner. After walking into the battle arena, Wang Yi was a little surprised. It was not in the style of an underground boxing ring. Instead, it was more like an ancient palace. It had a golden roof, a red door, and a golden pillar with a dragon coiled around it. This antique style made people feel comfortable. In the main hall, waiters kept walking past. They were dressed in ancient palace attire, making it really feel like they were in an ancient palace. Wang Yi could not understand why a place that was similar to an underground boxing ring would be so elegant. All the gamblers followed the rules and walked to a reception area to line up. Since he had nothing to do, Wang Yi followed the stream of people and joined the long queue. However, the efficiency at the front desk seemed to be very good. After a while, it was Wang Yi's turn. Sir, how many chips do you want to purchase? Behind the counter, a beautiful girl in palace attire asked with a professional smile. Wang Yi suddenly realized that this was the place to exchange money for chips. Although Wang Yi was here to look for trouble, there was no need to make things difficult for the girl in front of him. After all, the other party was just working. Meanwhile, he was looking for someone from the Shu family. Furthermore, although he was furious that the Shu family had suppressed the Su family, he still followed the rules. This made Wang Yi willing to attack the Shu family under the rules. Exclamation mark. With a thought, the black leather bag containing 5 million yuan instantly appeared in his hand from the system space. Then, Wang Yi threw his bag on the counter. Under the girl's surprised gaze, he said, "I'll exchange these." The girl opened the purse's zipper, and her mouth fell open in shock. Exchanging 5 million yuan for chips at one go wasn't that big of a deal. After all, there were people who exchanged larger amounts of money. However, what really surprised the girl was that she had never seen anyone come with so much cash. This was because the customers who came here would basically use their cards no matter how much money they exchanged for chips. When they left, they would exchange their chips for cash and transfer the money to their accounts. The girl was put in a difficult position, but her professional smile remained unchanged. She smiled and said, "Sir, I'm sorry. Please wait for a moment." With that, the girl walked out of the counter and ran to the back. Not long after, she returned with a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man came in front of Wang Yi and said apologetically, "Sorry, sir. I made you wait. My surname is Cheng, and I'm the manager of the Shu family battle arena. Are you going to exchange all this money for chips?" Although Wang Yi was here to cause trouble for the Shu family, he had to admit that the service was really good. Wang Yi nodded and said calmly, "Yes, please change them all." As soon as he finished speaking, the manager surnamed Cheng waved his hand. A few people walked out from behind, each of them holding a cash verification machine. Their actions were swift. Within a few minutes, the cash in the bag was cleared. Then, another manager surnamed Lu took something that looked like a tablet from the girl. Then, he tapped on the tablet a few more times before handing it to Wang Yi. He smiled and said, "Hello, sir. I've exchanged the chips for you." After Wang Yi took it, he could not help but be stunned. Were these his chips? Shouldn't they be like the round chips in the movies from his previous life? What the hell was this? As if he knew that this was Wang Yi's first time here, the manager with the surname Lu tapped the middle of the tablet twice. Then, the screen lit up. Then, he introduced the system. "Sir, the chips have been placed in the betting machine. The number above it represents the number of chips you have." Wang Yi took a look and saw a string of numbers on the screen. It was exactly 5 million. Below that is the betting area. Before the match begins, you can check the information of the martial artists to use as a basis for your bets. At the bottom is the reward function. If the martial artist you bet on wins the competition for you, and if you are in a good mood, you can reward the martial artist here with a tip. Wang Yi couldn't help but shake his head. He thought that he had encountered some high-tech technology, but it turned out that this thing was just for show. This thing might not even be as good as the first-generation tablets in his previous life. After exchanging his chips, Wang Yi followed the crowd in. After walking around a few side halls, he suddenly felt as if he had entered another world. His vision suddenly became clear. Then, a huge circular building appeared in front of everyone. It felt like the ancient Roman battlefield in his previous life. It occupied a large area and occupied almost half of the entire battle arena. This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. There were a total of 5 floors. Each floor was surrounded by countless seats where people could observe the match from. Meanwhile, there was an extremely wide, open space in the middle of each floor. The empty space was filled with potholes. These potholes were obviously left behind by those martial artists who had fought for many years. Some of the marks had turned blackish red and could not be washed away. Many people must have bled or even lost their lives in this place. Wang Yi found a random place to sit down. There should have been a battle below since someone was cleaning up the area. There seemed to be someone else who was severely injured, and dark red blood flowed all over the ground. He looked at the betting machine in his hand. At this moment, a line of text appeared on it. "There's still half an hour before the next martial arts competition. You can place your bets before the martial arts competition begins." Then, there was information about the 2 martial artists. Wang Yi casually clicked on the message. One was called Meng Hao, while the other was called Qi Gaoyuan. Both of them had similar levels of strength. One of them had 30 victories and 11 losses. The other had 27 victories and 8 losses. Actually, it didn't matter which one he placed his bet on. Both of their odds were about the same. This mainly depended on luck. If he placed his bet on the less popular warrior, he might be able to win as the banker controlled the results. Of course, Wang Yi did not have such worries, because he would definitely be the eventual winner. As the field was cleaned up, a new round of martial artists also arrived. Wang Yi scanned the area with his spiritual power and found that the person called Meng Hao was probably slightly stronger. He tapped a few times on the screen and bet all 5 million chips on Meng Hao. At this moment, Meng Hao's odds were 1.7. In other words, if Meng Hao won, Wang Yi would get 8.5 million yuan. Meanwhile, in one of the rooms in the battle arena, various equipment was constantly flashing. A few people were sitting in front of a computer, their hands flying as they kept typing. This was the control room of the battle arena. After the gamblers placed their bets, the information would be gathered here. It was convenient to control the odds. Young Master Shu, a large sum of chips suddenly entered the game just now. They all bet that Meng Hao would win. Right now, the person who bet on Meng Hao will win 1.93 times more than if he bet on Qi Gaoyuan. Should I lower Meng Hao's odds? At that moment, the person sitting in front of the computer and typing on the keyboard suddenly stood up and asked a sinister-looking young man in a wine-red suit. Lower the odds? Why should we lower the odds? Increase Meng Hao's odds by 3 more points. Tell old Gao to make arrangements. We'll let Gaoyuan win this tournament. The sinister-looking young man was fiddling with an expensive jade bead in his hand. Time passed very quickly, and it was almost half an hour later. Dong! A bell-like sound instantly resounded throughout the entire arena. Then, another voice sounded and spread throughout the entire arena through the loudspeaker. Next is today's 7th martial arts tournament. Let's welcome our martial arts warrior. On our left is Meng Hao, nicknamed the Crazy Man. He has 30 victories and 11 losses. Meanwhile, on our right is Qi Gaoyuan, who is nicknamed the Mad Dog. He has 27 victories and 8 losses in his list of impressive achievements. The two martial fighters are both at the peak of rank I. Their battle results are also so close. It can be said that this is an evenly matched battle. It will definitely bring everyone a satisfying visual feast. Those who haven't placed their bets yet, hurry up and place your bets. The martial arts tournament will soon begin. Just as he finished speaking, the two people standing on both sides walked to the middle of the venue. Both sides clenched their fists and collided in midair. Then, they instantly fought. As soon as Meng Hao appeared, he suppressed Qi Gaoyuan. Wang Yi could not help but nod. He had good taste. No one who could stay in such a place for a long time was weak. Thus, their combat experience was usually very rich. Furthermore, if Meng Hao was slightly stronger, he might be able to stir the scales of victory and tilt them towards him. However, what happened next made Wang Yi frown. Meng Hao, whose momentum had been surging like a rainbow at the start of the fight, suddenly made a mistake. His opponent took advantage of the situation and retaliated beautifully. In the eyes of ordinary people, this was because Meng Hao had advanced rashly and given his opponent an opportunity. However, how could this be hidden from Wang Yi? He could sense that the few times that Meng Hao had been attacked, he had been able to dodge them all. However, instead of dodging, he simply took the attacks head-on. Wang Yi's lips curled up as a cold smile filled with endless mockery appeared on his face. They were looking for trouble. I'm willing to play according to the rules of the game with you. You were the ones who didn't follow the rules of the game first, so don't blame me. The situation on the battlefield became clearer over time. Because of his previous mistakes, Meng Hao had completely fallen into a disadvantageous position. He was constantly suppressed by Qi Gaoyuan. Don't be a coward, Meng Hao. Fight him head-on. As long as you win, I'll give you 50,000 yuan. Meng Hao, you piece of trash. You couldn't even dodge such an obvious attack. I've placed all of my wealth on you. If you dare to lose, I'll kill you. Good job, Qi Gaoyuan. Right, beat him up ruthlessly for me. Don't hold back, haha. In the audience, the gamblers who placed heavy stakes on the two of them shouted crazily at the two warriors. The people who had bet on Qi Gaoyuan's victory were naturally extremely excited. Meanwhile, the people who had bet on Meng Hao's victory didn't look so good. They kept shouting and cursing. Perhaps the gamblers' words had provoked Meng Hao. In the next moment, Meng Hao seemed to have become a different person. His face was filled with madness. He simply gave up on defending and charged at his opponent without any regard for his life. The situation on the field became complicated again. Meanwhile, the enthusiasm of the gamblers was stirred. In the audience, they waved the betting machines in their hands and shouted. The battle between the two of them could be considered fierce. Basically, their punches landed on the flesh of their opponent. Blood was dripping from the corners of their mouths. Meanwhile, large mouthfuls of blood dyed their clothes red. The two of them seemed to be unable to feel any pain as they continued to bombard each other. All of a sudden, the two of them caught each other's weakness. Their faces turned cold, and their expressions became incomparably sinister. They clenched their fists tightly, and their veins bulged as they threw all their strength toward their enemy's chest. The outcome was about to be decided. In the audience, the shouts instantly disappeared and it became so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The gamblers looked nervously at the arena, praying that the martial arts warrior they had placed their bets on would win. Wang Yi could not help but chuckle and muttered to himself, "Their acting is pretty good." Then, a wave of spiritual energy seeped out of his body and surged towards the two people in the arena. In the middle of the fighting arena, Meng Hao's expression was vicious as he punched his opponent's chest with all his might. However, his heart was filled with excitement. It was not that he was confident of winning, severely injuring, or even killing his opponent. On the contrary, he was absolutely confident that he would definitely lose after this punch. As for why he was so excited about losing, there was naturally a reason why. Before the battle began, the higher-ups had instructed him that he had to lose this round. Furthermore, he could not let anyone notice anything amiss. After being in the battle arena for many years, he was naturally a good actor. He knew how to fight and how to stir up the emotions of the audience without letting others see that it was fake and he was acting. Although he threw a punch at the same time as his opponent, he deliberately slowed down. He had absolute confidence that he could let his opponent hit him in advance. Furthermore, they were all in the same circle, so they naturally knew their limits. It looked intimidating, but the impact on their bodies was not that serious. As long as this punch was completed, this match would be over. Although he would be injured, he would be able to recover in a few months. Furthermore, the higher-ups would reward him handsomely. With this in mind, Meng Hao grew even more excited. After all, as the loser, due to his injuries, the rewards from the higher-ups belonged to him. Meanwhile, at this moment, Wang Yi's spiritual power had already arrived on the scene and instantly enveloped Qi Gaoyuan. Qi Gaoyuan did not notice that his punch had suddenly slowed down as he used his spiritual power. However, his slightly slower punch completely changed the outcome of this martial arts tournament. Bang, crack, the sound of bones shattering instantly resounded throughout the surroundings. This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. Meng Hao watched in disbelief as the fist slammed into his opponent's chest. Then, Qi Gaoyuan's body was sent flying by the punch. Then, a person who looked like a referee ran into the venue and arrived in front of the fallen Qi Gaoyuan. Looking at the unconscious state of the other party, he checked for a moment before standing up and nodding toward the distance. Congratulations to the crazy man Meng Hao for winning this martial arts tournament. This is his 31st victory in his martial arts career. Cheers to our victor. The loudspeaker sounded throughout the entire battle arena. In the audience, there was a tsunami of cheers. It was obvious that these people had bet on Meng Hao's victory. An icon that looked like an email icon kept flashing on the screen of the betting machine in Wang Yi's hand. He clicked on the icon and a message suddenly popped up. Congratulations, esteemed guest. The martial arts warrior you placed your bet on won this martial arts competition for you. You obtained 10 million chips. Since young Master Shu increased the odds, Wang Yi's winnings increased from 8.5 million to 10 million. Meanwhile, although Meng Hao had won, he wasn't happy at all. He stood there without moving. It was as if he was accepting everyone's cheers, but his heart was filled with disbelief. What the hell is this? Shouldn't I be the one lying on the ground? He had clearly gone easy on his opponent and slowed down his punch. Why did the other party not follow the rules? Of course, no one was destined to be able to answer the questions in his heart. No matter what, the martial arts tournament had already ended, and the result could not be changed. He was the one who had defeated Qi Gaoyuan and became the final winner. However, Meng Hao didn't follow the instructions of the higher-ups to lose the martial arts tournament. Martial arts warriors who did not listen to the words of the higher-ups usually had their limbs broken before being thrown into the city to fend off for themselves. There were even some who would simply disappear from Kang City. Then, a few days later, a nameless corpse would appear in the wilderness. With these thoughts in mind, Meng Hao couldn't help but feel as if his entire body was frozen. It was as if he had fallen into an icy cavern. Beads of cold sweat rolled down his forehead. Pa! A precious jade bead was forcefully thrown to the ground and turned into countless jade fragments. In the control room, young Master Shu, who was dressed in a red suit, smashed the jade bead in his hand on the ground. With a furious expression, he asked coldly, "What happened? Why did Meng Hao dare to win?" The room instantly fell silent. Everyone was silent like cicadas in the winter. For a moment, no one dared to reply. This person was famous for his cruelty. Finally, someone stood up by the computer and pointed at the computer screen. With a trembling voice, he said, Young Master Shu, according to the video, Meng Hao slowed down his punching speed. Under normal circumstances, Qi Gaoyuan would definitely be able to knock Meng Hao down before he could hit him. However, for some reason, Qi Gaoyuan's punch suddenly slowed down. In fact, he was even slower than Meng Hao. That was how Meng Hao won. Young Master Shu waved his hand and signaled the other party to stop talking. Then, a cruel smile flashed across young Master Shu's face. He said, "No matter what the reason is, since the battle arena has suffered such a great loss, don't let them appear in Kang City again tomorrow." Everyone could not help but shiver. Although his voice was gentle, the coldness hidden within could be heard by anyone. "Arrange for an explosive round next to compensate for our losses." Yes, with that, the control room became busy again. There was still some time before the next round began. Wang Yi was also bored and could not help but plan for his future. Although he was more knowledgeable about cultivation, the system was still his foundation. Meanwhile, the system required as much as 10 billion yuan to upgrade from the primary level to the intermediate level. To him, this was definitely an astronomical figure. In his previous life, he was just an ordinary person. He did not even have a million yuan, let alone 10 billion yuan. He had no idea how to earn 10 billion yuan. As for doing business, Wang Yi decided to forget about it. After all, he was not qualified to do so. However, there were still two ways for him to solve this problem. He could go out of the city to hunt ferocious beasts as he did in the past. After all, the materials he obtained from high-leveled beasts were rather valuable. However, the disadvantage was that he had to travel everywhere. The high-level beasts were usually found deep in the wilderness. Although it was not difficult for Wang Yi to hunt them, it was very troublesome to find them. Furthermore, the beasts that Wang Yi had hunted previously were only worth tens of millions. If he relied on this method to gather 10 billion yuan, he really didn't know how long it would take him to hunt these beasts. Of course, there was another way. Wang Yi could still sell his skills. He also had the Lu Maoxing Peak cooking card. Thus, it would not be a problem for him to raise his cooking skills by 1 or 2 minor levels. It wouldn't be too much to charge 1.8 million yuan for a meal, right? Most importantly, the raw materials were also free. Once they were used up, he could go into the wilderness to obtain more materials at any time. This should be faster than simply hunting beasts and earning money, but it would only be slightly faster. After all, there were few people who could adapt to such a level of spending. All in all, although these two methods could allow him to earn money quickly, it was still difficult to earn 10 billion yuan. Buzz. This is from the SoundStories Audiobook YouTube channel. As the betting machine in his hand shook, Wang Yi regained his senses and realized that the information about the next round of martial artists had been released. His lips gradually curled up and he could not help but flash a smile. Speaking of earning money, wasn't there a foolish spender present here? He was not just referring to the Shu family. There were also many large families in Kang City. With Wang Yi's status as a top grade grandmaster, he could travel from one family to another. He could ask for tens of millions of yuan from each family. Those who dared to not give him money would be slapped to death. Could there really be people who wanted money more than their lives? In that case, 10 billion yuan didn't seem so difficult to obtain. Holy shit, Wang Yi was suddenly shocked by his own thoughts. When did his thoughts become so dangerous? He was a standard good young man who lived in a socialist and peaceful society. He had been taught all kinds of things since he was young. Thus, he definitely could not have such a dangerous idea. It was fine if he demanded money from the Shu family. After all, they had previously targeted the Su family, so it was understandable for them to be targeted. However, even if it was the Shu family, Wang Yi was only prepared to teach them a lesson. He did not intend to kill them. Wang Yi couldn't help but silently remind himself not to lose his heart due to powerful forces. Otherwise, he would only become a walking corpse with great strength. Without letting his imagination run wild, he casually opened the information about the two martial artists. Ghost Hand Wang He had 41 victories and 2 losses. Meanwhile, the thousand-faced Jie Qingfeng had 17 victories and 18 losses. Wang Yi shook his head helplessly. The person in charge of this battle arena was really petty. The situation was not big enough. They had just lost the previous round, so were they going to recoup their losses in this round? Weren't they too anxious? This was too obvious. The difference in the achievements between the two martial artists was too great. Everyone knew who should be the one to win. This was equivalent to giving money for nothing. It was just as Wang Yi had guessed. Although Wang Yi's odds were only 1.09, almost everyone in the audience was betting on Wang Yi. As for the very few people who had bet on Jie Qingfeng's victory, they were just coveting the high odds and wanted to take a gamble. Haha, is the Shu family giving us benefits? They actually arranged such a martial arts tournament. I've spent all my wealth on Wang Yi. I want to win back everything that I had previously lost with interest. I still have 30,000 yuan left. I'll bet everything on Jie Qingfeng. As long as he can win, I'll break even. However, Wang Yi did not care. Since he had already decided not to follow the rules of the game, it did not matter who he bet on to win. This was because whoever he bet on would definitely be the final winner. Since that was the case, Wang Yi naturally had to bet on the warrior with higher odds. Thus, he placed the 10 million chips on Jie Qingfeng. At this moment, Jie Qingfeng's odds had reached a terrifying ratio of 5.5. The moment Wang Yi bet 10 million on Jie Qingfeng, someone in the control room suddenly stood up and said anxiously, "Young Master Shu, a guest, just placed a 10 million bet on Jie Qingfeng. If Jie Qingfeng wins, our losses will be even greater than before." Upon hearing this, young Master Shu's face instantly darkened. He clenched his fists and said, "Inform them to let Wang Yi win." The two of them arrived at the center of the arena. A sound signaled that the martial arts tournament had begun and the two of them instantly became embroiled in a fight. Just as the martial arts competition started, Wang Yi directly intervened. His spiritual power enveloped Wang Yi and suppressed his strength to less than 30% of his original strength. Although the martial arts fight did not last for a long time, it was definitely enough to drive him crazy. Their punches landed on the flesh of their opponent and blood splattered everywhere. In the end, not a single piece of intact skin could be found on their bodies. Bang! Under Jie Qingfeng's incredulous gaze, Wang Yi fell to the ground and fainted. The control room was exceptionally quiet. It felt as if a black cloud was pressing down on the city. No one dared to make a sound. Only young Master Shu's heavy breathing sounded in the room. Finally, someone broke the silence and stuttered, Young Master Shu, will we still continue on to the next round?" "Yes. I don't believe that we will continue to lose money." Young Master Shu was like a wounded beast. He sounded crazy and hysterical. Meanwhile, Wang Yi looked at his chips, which had reached an amount of 55 million yuan. He could not help but chuckle. This money is really easy to earn. The next martial arts tournament began once more. Wang Yi was not in the mood to look at the information on the martial artists. He simply bet his chips on the person with the highest odds. Wait till next part.